General surgeon. So, is there anything new in circumcision? I have done a PubMed search, Cochrane library search, and a Google search, and it is up to date till 2021. The benefits exceed the risks by 200 as to 1, and there is no detrimental effect on sexual function. And it is shown by this recent paper published in December 2020, which says that physiological and histological studies show that the glans and the underside of the shaft have neurological pathways for erogenous sensation. So the myth that circumcision can cause some amount of impotence is totally dispelled. The indications are paraphimosis, phimosis, recurrent balanitis that is usually seen in diabetics, and trauma. There is a very good paper published recently which shows that circumcision is as good as a vaccine, and it prevents a lot of recurrent UTIs in boys with urological abnormalities like a hypotonic bladder, vesico-ureteric reflux. It prevents a lot of cancers in male as well as female, and prevents a lot of sexually transmitted infections. Coming to the technique, as you can see here is phimosis. Plan your incision in such a way that it can be placed exactly at the glans, or if the patient has wished that there should be some skin ahead of the glans, then you can plan your incision in that manner and then go around completely, and then use your cautery for coagulating all the vessels. In adults, I use a unipolar cautery, and in children, I use a bipolar cautery. Coagulate all the small vessels all around the circumference and make sure that there is no bleeding. This is the only way your field will be extremely dry and the further steps will be much easier to perform. What I do now is catch hold of the tip with two mosquitoes and then make a dorsal slit. Once you make a dorsal slit, it is extremely important that you see the under surface of the prepuce and see whether there are any adhesions between the glans and the prepuce. Occasionally, there can be a lot of adhesions if the patient has suffered from recurrent balanitis. Here, now you can see I'm applying two more mosquitoes, so I can cut the mucosa directly under vision. So what I do is I first go on the left side. Now I'm making sure that there are no adhesions so that I can see the under surface of the prepuce. Once it is clear that there are no adhesions, you can go ahead and take a cut and make sure that the prepuce, under surface of the prepuce is properly seen. That way you can keep a very good cuff of the inner side of the prepuce. Once you have cut the dorsal aspect of the penile skin, you come ventrally, and now again you can see that I'm cutting the inner part of the prepuce under vision. Once that is done, you turn the whole prepuce over, and then the skin surface is cut. As you can see, there will be one or two big bleeders. These need to be ligated with 40 or 30 Vicryl. Once this is done, we take the first stitch at the 12 o'clock position, and this also helps as a stay suture. The choice of material is usually 40 or 30 Vicryl. Occasionally, some people do use chromic catgut because it dissolves much faster than Vicryl. Vicryl can be a bit irritating because the patients keep on coming back to you saying that the stitches have not yet come out. Now, this is the suture at the 6 o'clock position. This will also help as a stay suture. So once this is done, put a clamp on this and then suture the whole of the right side and make sure that there are no big bleeders when doing the suture. Bleeders. Continue the suturing all around. Now you can see that there is a very good cuff of the inner prepucial skin and the outer prepucial skin. And that is the main advantage of this procedure. That when you're doing the cutting under vision, you can see exactly the inner cuff as well as the outer cuff. Now this is the suturing that is complete. Confirm that there is no bleeding, and then you can safely cut your stay sutures, and then the dressing is usually done by betadine ointment. The most important thing to remember is releasing the frenular band. You usually incise it vertically and suture it horizontally. The main advantages of this procedure are it is precise, the frenulum can be released completely and adequately, and there are no chances of bleeding or hematoma. The complications that you usually come across are bleeding, infection, delayed healing, which is seen in diabetics, insufficient foreskin removal, excessive foreskin removal, adhesions and fibrosis, meatal stenosis, frenular band, and impotence. I hope I have shed some light on this most commonly done procedure in general surgery and urology. Thank you.
Thank you, Shishir. That was a great enlightenment on a simple procedure like circumcision. May I call upon Dr. Prasad Magdum to talk on ureteroscopy. He's not around at the moment, but we can listen to him in his pre-recorded session.
Good evening, respected seniors and my dear. Good evening, respected seniors and my dear friends. First, I would like to thank Kolhapur Surgical Society for giving me this opportunity. Today, I'll be speaking on ureteroscopy and RRS. Coming to the introduction, there is trend in surgical practice today towards developing minimally invasive techniques. Endoscopic surgery using minimally invasive techniques has been the frontier of medical innovation in the last 2 decades. With the development of small caliber flexible instrument, which allows endoscopic surgery of urinary tract to treat a wide variety of lesions within the kidney. But why there is a rising trend for URS? Because of shorter hospital stay, improved cosmesis, early return to work, and because of the suboptimal results with ESWL, there is a rising trend for ureteroscopy. Coming to the history, in 1912, the first ureteroscopy was done by Hugh Hampton Young, who is also called as father of modern urology. A rigid 12 French cystoscope was advanced into massively directed ureter of a patient with posterior urethral walls. But in the late 1950s, there was first development of the fiber optic endoscopes. In 1964, the first flexible ureteroscopy was done by Marshall via ureterotomy using a 9 French flexible endoscope for diagnostic purpose. But in 1998, Grasso and Chalik first performed RRS using flexible ureteroscopy and holmium laser. So there has been a tremendous evolution in the ureteroscopes. Initially, there were rigid ureteroscopes consisting of the rod length system having outer diameter of almost 12 to 13.5 French, which is the current size of mini PERC or the mini PCML. After rigid ureteroscope came the semi-rigid ureteroscope. Because of the fiber optic illumination, there was decrease in the instrumentation size. The current semi-rigid ureteroscope size is of 6/7.5 French. And because of the development of laser and pneumatic lithotripsy, again, there were development of flexible ureteroscopy. So what is the future trend? The future trend is robotic ureteroscopy and the virtual ureteroscopy. Currently, there are two types of flexible ureteroscopy, the fiber optic and the digital. The difference between them is only in the image relay and the light transmission, but it is tremendous. Here you can see the conventional fiber optic ureteroscope image quality, and here you can see the image quality of the digital. So with the digital, the image quality has tremendously improved. So what is the definition of RIRS? Surgery performed within the renal pelvic LSL system and parenchyma using instrument introduced in retrograde fashion through the ureter and lower uterine tract is termed as retrograde intrarenal surgery. The advantage, more proximal ureter and intrarenal collecting system can be easily accessed rather than the conventional ureteroscopy. So what are the indications for ureteroscopy? There are three indication: diagnostic, therapeutic, and the other indications. So coming to the diagnostic indications, it can be used for evaluation of hematuria. It can be used for evaluation of positive upper tract cytology if there are any filling defects which are seen in radiographic images, or for surveillance after conservative treatment of upper tract tumor. Coming to the therapeutic, mostly ureteroscopy is used for stone diseases. It can be used as a primary or failed for treatment of primary stone or failed ESWL. RIRS assisted ESWL can be done. In this, the stone can be fragmented. Majority of the stone bulk can be fragmented with RIRS, and the remaining small fragments or remaining stone fragment can be treated with ESWL. Concomitant renal and ureteral stones can be taken care using RIRS. Stone within the calyceal diverticulum or stones with nephrocalcinosis can also be taken care with RIRS. Other indication, it can be used for treating PUJ obstruction by doing endopilotomy, treating anastomotic strictures, treatment of urothelial tumors, or fulguration of bleeding vessels. Also, now with the help of RIRS, you can do retrograde assisted puncture for PCM. So this is the video presentation of semi-rigid ureteroscopy. The most important thing is placement of guide wire through the ureteric orifice. Once the guide wire is placed, then the semi-rigid ureteroscope is slowly passed. You have to be very careful while passing the scope through the UV junction or the ureteric orifice. After that, after placing the guide wire, the scope is further passed into the mid ureter and then into upper ureter. Here you can see the stone impacted into the mid ureter at the level of iliac crossing. Once the stone is visualized, you can take out the guide wire, but it is always better to keep the guide wire. And with the help of energy sources, you can start fragmenting the stone. Stone can be fragmented with pneumatic lithoclast or laser. So Dr. Vinayak will be speaking more on laser and the newer energy sources. So here you can see the stone being fragmented with the help of thulium laser. The stone is fragmented into very small fragments or into dust. Coming to RIRS, so here you can see the wire is passed through the ureteric orifice, and then the semi-rigid instrument is passed into the ureter. The ureter is well dilated, so it was very easy to pass the scope. Once the scope is passed up till the pelvic calyceal system, you can see the stone. Here, this is the PUJ. The upper calyx can be seen well. Here the stone is visualized, and with the help of laser, you can start fragmenting the stone. This stone can be fragmented or dusted. If small particles or small fragments are seen, you can basket them out, or you can do a concomitant ESWL for a larger fragment size. A stent is placed so that the stone fragment can be passed along the stent. So coming to flexible ureteroscopy, there are two types, the conventional and now the digital, and also the newer generation is the single-use flexible ureteroscopy. So here in X-ray you can see, on this side you can see the semi-rigid ureteroscope introduced up to the pelvic calyceal system, but being semi-rigid, it cannot be bent, and it can reach only up till the pelvic calyceal system or into the upper calyx. On the opposite side, you can see the flexible ureteroscope introduced into the lower calyx, the mid calyx, and into the upper calyx. So this is the video of flexible ureteroscopy. You can see the image quality. The image quality is improved, and with the help of laser, you can start fragmenting the stone. The stone can be fragmented, dusted, or again it can be made into small pieces and can be basketed. So it is very helpful in treating stones in all the calyces. So what are the complications of ureteroscopy or RRS? The most important thing is urosepsis. So you are supposed to make sure that the culture is negative and then only perform the procedure. The other complication consists of bleeding, but because of use of holmium laser or thulium laser, the chances of bleeding are very less. The most dreadful complication or the most fearful complication is either ureteral perforation or ureteral avulsion. So it is very important that you perform this procedure very carefully. You are make sure that the guide wire is properly placed. If the ureter is very tight, abandon the procedure, put a stent, and again you can come back. And the late complications can be ureteral strictures. So
Thank you, Prasad. That's great. I hope that he will make it to the session, but if he can't, I think Dr. Magdum, his father, will be able to answer. May I ask Dr. Rahul? Now Rahul is working.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, you take
My slides is not pre-recorded, so I want to share my slide from here.
Okay.
Sorry.
I can actually, Dr. Basavaraj can share it. You can talk.
Sure.
Dr. Basavaraj, can you share Dr. Rahul Patil's slides? They are not recorded.
Rahul sir, are you going to do it from your laptop or we should?
No, I will do from my laptop.
Okay, so you just start the screen sharing. I'll stop it from here.
Okay. It is visible to all?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. Good evening to all. Today I will be speaking on the transurethral resection of the bladder tumor, that is TURBT. It is done to remove all visible bladder tumors, and it provides a specimen for the pathological examination so as to determine the accurate stage and the grade of the tumor, which helps in further treatment of the disease. So it is done in lithotomy positions where all the pressure points has to be well padded. Then first step is evaluation of the urethra and the bladder. Then see where the tumor is located, which part of the bladder. Then whether it is a single or multiple, whether it is sessile or pedunculated. Then next step is resection of the growth. Prior to the resection of the growth, we have to calibrate the urethra, either by dilating the meatus or by the Otis urethrotom or by doing a metallic urethral dilator. So if the growth is small, then we do a en bloc resections. That is totally we resect from its top. If this growth is large, then we resect it bit by bit in fractionated resections. So after complete resecting the bladder tumor, then we identify the muscle at the base and it resect it separately and it send it separately. Then after that, we achieve complete hemostasis and put a catheter. It is after insertion of the catheter is followed by installation of the mitomycin C in most of the cases. So most common problem we can come across with this TURBT is obturator jerk. It is located at the lateral wall. So to avoid this obturator jerk, it is better to do with general anesthesia with good muscle relaxant or spinal anesthesia with added with obturator block. Other these measures which I have given, these may or may not help in most of the time. So complications of the TURBT are minor complication includes minor hematuria, irritative lower tract symptoms, infections. Major complications includes gross hematuria, bladder perforations, and TUR syndrome. So this is running one video. So first we have to do a cystourethropy, examine the urethra, see for any urethral stricture. Then go up to the prostatic urethra, see any papillary regions in the prostatic urethra. Then, so this is a prostatic urethra. This is, then I'm entering into the bladder. So, and then see the ureteric orifices, right ureteric orifices and left ureteric orifices. See the right ureteric orifice, just near to the ureteric orifice, one lesion is there. So, and look for the other contralateral ureteric orifice. Then again, you come to the tumor, you define the tumor, where it is located exactly, its relations, architecture, its stalk attachment with the bladder. After defining the growth, you inspect the bladder thoroughly, its lateral walls, posterior wall, dome of the bladder, so as to rule out any other coexisting lesions. So after that, we have to come out and again calibrate the urethra, as I said before, and then we use 26 French sheath with resectoscope. So then after this, we have to see. Then this resection is started. As it is small growth, we are directly detaching from its stalk. So this is a retrograde resection. So these strokes should be given with a very short burst. So while resecting it, whatever bleeders comes, we have to achieve the hemostasis immediately. Otherwise, if the vision goes, then further resections will be difficult. So these resections will be with a millimeter. We are progressing, and whatever the blood vessels comes, immediately we have to achieve hemostasis. So this is a again bleeders, we have achieved a hemostasis. Then after this, we have resected, detached the mass totally, then achieving the hemostasis from the bed and also the surrounding area. So this resected mass we are taking in total outside. And after that, we have to give again bladder wash to remove the any residual pieces. So after this removal of the pieces, again we go with resectoscope, and from the tumor bed we resect it. The superficial bits we take. So see this superficial bites of the muscle, retrosal muscle, we have to take from the bed and also from the adjacent area. Before while resecting this, we should be careful because it should not go deep, otherwise it will cause a bladder perforation. If it is extraperitoneal perforation, then it can be managed conservatively. If it is extraperitoneal, then we have to repair it surgically only. So, and this muscle bites has to be sent it separately for the pathological examinations, because the presence or involvement of the muscle, it becomes a T2, and non-involvement, if the muscles are involved, it is become T1. So both have a different treatment strategies. So take it separately and send it separately. After that, again go with the cautery, then achieve the hemostasis from the resected area and from the margins of the tumor, totally all around. And after that, after ensuring the total hemostasis, we put a three-way Foley's catheter and ensure that the irrigant is clear. And most of the time we instill mitomycin C intravesically and would start irrigation. Keep it for 1 hour and then continue irrigations. So this is unlike first growth. This is a large growth which is situated at the left lateral wall and also involving the anterior wall of the bladder. So I started resecting it from the top to the bottom, bit by bit, in fractionated manner. So when the moment I came at the base, towards the base for resection of the tumor, the obturator jerk started. So see, you can see the obturator jerk, and because of that I was not able to see this is jerk, obturator jerk. Because of that I was not able to proceed my resection. So So we have to convert this case into the general anesthesia. Only after that I was able to complete the resections. So the difficulty I got is this one obturator jerk, and the second was the mass was there at the anterior wall, which was very difficult to assess. So we have to ask assistant to give a suprapubic pressure and bend down the scope, and bladder should not be distended, it should be partially filled. Only that we can assess the anterior wall growth. So this is how the section completed. And this is one 48-year female patients. We did a cystoscopy. After that, we found this is a big mass at the bladder neck and trigone. So it mimics like a median lobe of the prostate, but it is not. So actually, you can see the smooth surface. We resected it completely, and after the histopathological report came as a leiomyoma of the bladder. So this is a last video where you can see this is large growth hanging from the anterior wall of the bladder, and also these irregular masses extending to the lateral wall. Somehow we were able to complete the resections totally and achieving good hemostasis, and the report came as a leiomyoma of the bladder with areas of calcification. Thank you.
Sir, you are on a mute. Rajiv sir, you are on a mute. You are on mute, sir.
Yeah, got it. Rahul, that was great. Very good presentation. We can now move on. I think I have the next presentation. So Basavaraj, can you take over and run my video, please?
Yes, I'm just trying to do that. Rahul sir, could you stop presenting your screen so that we can share?
Sir, stop केलेलं आहे.
Yeah, thanks.
Welcome once again. I'm going to talk on urethroplasty. Just to orient, the lower urinary tract anatomy is consisting of bladder and urethra, and the urethra is again divided into anterior and posterior. The stricture is formed by a noxious stimulus, which goes on to form a fibrous plaque circumferentially, and it is seen here. There are plenty of complications, predominantly infective, but also due to obstructive symptoms. You get thick walled trabeculated bladder and acute retention. The management of urethral stricture has traveled the whole 360-degree circle, starting from Badenoch's pull through way back in 19th century, through to a humble urethral dilatation, to a fancy endoscopic optical urethrotomy, back to open reconstructive repair. I'm going to talk on 4 of such procedures. The dorsal onlay buccal mucosal graft urethroplasty is the commonest. This is the bulbar urethral stricture. The procedure starts by dissecting the urethra in each and every case, localizing the area of stricture. In dorsal onlay, you do a dorsal rotation, do a dorsal urethrotomy, followed by a buccal mucosal graft placement, which is placed on the tunica albuginea, quilted, as you can see here, followed by the closure, which is done by a technique called 3-in-1 stitch. An absorbable stitch is taken through the tunica albuginea of the corpora, buccal mucosa, and the spongiosa, and this is done over a silicone catheter. The second one is ventral onlay, which on the other hand is a easy procedure without any requirement of dorsal dissection or quilting. This is the stricture seen here.
It starts with a ventral urethrotomy. The apical stitch is taken. It's passed through the graft. The graft is taken down and it's cinched with the raw area facing towards you, followed by the suturing of the edges. Here is the right edge, and here it is showing the left edge. It progresses towards the distal apex, and after completion, you do a spongioplasty to complete the procedure. The third one is a double phase required for obstructive, obliterated strictures. It is done by taking a ventral incision in the ventral approach called Parmentieri approach. You enter the lumen, then you do a contralateral incision on the dorsal aspect, dissect the dorsal aspect laterally, put a graft, quilt it, and complete the procedure by ventral onlay and spongioplasty. The second one is a Gelman approach, which is a dorsal approach by dorsal rotation, urethrotomy, enter the lumen, define the stricture, which is oblique, excising a good healthy spongioplasty, quilt it, and again complete the procedure by a dorsal onlay as alluded to earlier. This is the semi-live demonstration of this Gelman approach, the dorsal approach. You define the stricture, excise it. Here the excision is done only of the fibrous element. You leave behind a good healthy spongiosal bed, as you can see here. A buccal mucosal graft after harvesting is placed here, sutured to all the edges and quilted, following which the procedure is completed by a dorsal onlay. The fourth one is an anastomotic urethroplasty called EPA for a pelvic fracture urethral distraction defect. It starts by dissecting proximally. The stricture is localized by passing a bougie down the urethra, and as you can see, it's being palpated here. You must preserve as much of the distal segment as possible in order to bridge the gap. The dissection continues through the stricture. The cut is through the stricture, and care is taken to avoid any injury to the vital structures like rectum and anal canal, which are located here in this area. So you shouldn't go in that area. Then comes the step of defining the proximal segment by putting down a Haigru's dilator. Here it's not palpated, and therefore we have proceeded to the second technique called cutting over the light. You put a endoscope down the suprapubic tract and shine a light in the perineum, as you can see here. There is also a third technique called Husseini's needle technique, but here the light is shining very well, and therefore the dissection has continued gradually and carefully, where you can see an emerging Haigru's dilator. Next is the step of spatulation. The spatulation is done on the contralateral aspects, distally and proximally, the distal dorsal and anterior proximal. The last step is bringing these two ends together by a suture material 40 Vicryl, always a absorbable stitch. It's done based on a clock, which is seen here, and it is related to the proximal segment. Sutures are taken at 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. And as you can see here, it is quite supple. So in summary, which is based on my previous experience of 2000 strictures as well as literature, there is a high success rate of urethroplasty. All the techniques are minimally.
May I ask Dr. Vihen Magdum to start his presentation? Dr. Basavaraj, Dr. Magdum, please. Dr. Vishwanath Magdum.
First of all, I express my sincere thanks to
Surgical
Kola
Society
for giving me opportunity to present PCNL. PCNL is one of the most common surgery for the kidney stones, and day by day it is
becoming more popular and more efficient also. PCNL is used for stones more than 2 centimeters in size. But nowadays, even stones in the lower calyx less than 2 centimeters also are taken care with the improved PCNL, what is called a mini PER. Then most other common indication is Stavern calcula. Previously, Stavern calcula were used by other methods, but now PCNL has become as a solo therapy for the Stavern calcula. Stones in the ectopic kidney, horseshoe kidney are also the most common indication for PCNL. And when there is a failure of the ERWL or even for the upper ureteric stones impacted, PCNL is the most common mode of treatment to take care of these stones. In PCNL, first we do cystoscopy and pass a guide wire and then uretary catheter and inject dye. This is for to visualize the pelvic LSL system. Once after the cystoscopy, we turn the patient and give the prone position. And in the prone position, we puncture the kidney under fluoroscopy. And puncture is the most important step into the PCNL because once you puncture should be from the fornix into the calyx, and that will reduce the bleeding. The most common complication of PCNL is a bleeding. So puncture is very important, and puncture can be done under CR, or also nowadays puncture can be done ultrasound guided also. So once you puncture the kidney and fluid is coming, clear urine is coming, you pass the guide wire. And along that, we serially dilate the tract. And once you dilate the tract, then you pass the nephroskop and visualize the pelvic LSL system. And small stones, if are there, they can be directly picked up and taken care. The guide wire is very important step in the throughout the procedure. So this is called up a lifeline of the PCNL. So small stones are picked up, and stones more than the ampla sheath or more than 1 centimeter, they need to be fragmented. For that, we routinely use the pneumatic lithoclast, and this is a very simple and very useful and cost-effective method of taking care of the stones. You fragment the stones and remove that. But nowadays, we have got other methods, other energy sources like holmium laser, thulium laser. With that, even hard stone can be pulverized or they can be turned into powder. And this is very useful needed for the mini PER where the tract size is very small and you need not pick up the stone, but you powder them and wash this. One more is a important breakthrough is a shock pulse lithotripsy system. In this shock pulse lithotripsy system, stone is fragmented and simultaneously sucked. So we don't have to remove pieces or fragments of the stone. So obviously that reduces the complication like bleeding, trauma, and it is very useful for the Stavern calcula. So shock pulse lithotripsy system, reduces the injury to the surrounding tissues, reduces the blood, means less chances of the blood transfusion, and obviously this is very useful into the stones into the Staghorn calcula. This is one of the most common mode of treating through the PCNL. So these are the some of the X-rays where we have taken care by the PCNL, preoperative, postoperative. So PCNL has become now the standard of care. What are the open panel can be done? Radiation, to reduce the risk of radiation, ultrasound guided PCNL has been done, and bleeding complication is the most important. So to reduce that, we reduce the tract size and what we call mini perk is done. Nephrostomy causes the morbidity. So even nowadays, tubeless PCNL can be done. So these are the limitations of can be overcome by the ultrasound guided PCNL, then reducing the tract size, and obviously fragmenting the stone with the holmium and thulium laser, so that need not have to remove the fragments. So tract size can be reduced from conventional 26 French to less than 12 French also. So with the small tract size, there are less chances of bleeding, less sepsis, and patient can resume the work or can be discharged on the next day. So mini PCNL is now becoming is a standard of care for stones, kidney stones. Even now, ultra mini PCNL can be used so that less the morbidity and less the bleeding. So nephrostomy can be kept, but nephrostomy may not be required in all cases, and you can do tubeless PCNL, or even stent is not required, so that this reduces the morbidity and the patient can be discharged on the next day. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That was great. I think in a short you have covered a lot of knowledge on PCNL. May I ask Dr. Vinayak Kore to give his presentation? Dr. Basavaraj, if you could start.
Hello everyone, myself Dr. Vinayak Kore. My topic is the evolution of laser in urology. Actually, it is the evolution of urology along with the laser. What is laser? So basically, it is a light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. It was invented in 1958 by Charles Downey and Arthur Swallow, and was based on the Einstein's idea of particle wave duality. These are the lasers which were used in urology, but more their selection depends upon the biophysics of the laser tissue interaction, multimodal utility, safety, and cost. Most evolved and commonly used laser are holmium mag and thulium mag and diode laser. Holmium mag is a pulse laser with wavelength of 2140 nanometer, and it is considered to be pinnacle of evaluation of urological laser. It is used in both prostate and stone surgery. Laser as an intracorporeal lithotripter. Lithotripter has a key role in the success of the stone surgery, and that success is calculated on the basis of stone-free rate, number of setting, or number of ancillary procedures required, complications, duration of the stay. Commonest procedure in the urology are URS, PCNL, RIRS, TURP, HOLEP, and THULEP. Ureteroscopy. Present ureteroscopes are available in 4.5 French, 6.5 French, which can be used in both pediatric and adult endoscopy. Laser fiber comes in the 200 to 550 micron, so they are easily passed through the smallest ureteroscope with adequate space for irrigation fluid, which gives rise to good vision, short duration of surgery. Good storage is it decreases the stone retropulsion rate compared to the commonly used pneumatic lithotripters. So need for ancillary procedures like PCNL, RIRS decreases. RIRS, retrograde intrarenal surgery, which is performed using the flexible ureterorenoscope, which marks the beginning of the new era in urology. This is the flexible scope. RRS made possible to clear small and medium-sized renal stones without smaller skin incision. Only compatible energy source for RRS is the laser. So no laser, no RRS. Success of RRS is directly proportional to the quality of laser. Left-sided large renal stone, multiple right-sided renal stones, solitary kidney with the large pelvic stone, which are all cleared in the single setting with the help of RRS and laser. Special circumstances like body deformities, morbidly obesity, pediatric patient in which laser has special role. The advantages of the RRS is no skin incision, no scar, no renal puncture, less bleeding, less pain, early recovery. And important, it can be used with patients which are on blood thinner. As we all know, this is the era of miniaturization. Mini-perc and ultra-mini-perc are miniaturization of the PCNL. PCNL is the standard of care for the large renal stones, and a complication of PCNL are attributed to the tract sites. This can be reduced with the miniature endoscope by a small percutaneous tract and was named as the minimal invasive mini PCNL. Laser is the lithotripter of the choice for mini-perc, ultra-mini-perc. The advantages of the mini-perc are less bleeding, less complication, less pain, early recovery, good stone clearance rate, preferred in the renal anatomic anomalies and pediatric renal calculi. Holmium in prostate. Holmium has absorption depth above 0.4 mm in prostate, creating high energy density and good vaporization. Also, simultaneously, it coagulates small blood vessels up to the depth of 2 mm. This enables precise, sharp-free, virtually bloodless incision. Laser prostatectomy commonly done for BPH at present. The holmium laser enucleation is the commonest procedure done with the help of HOLEP on prostate. The advantages, it is hemostatic, may be used on patients who are on blood thinners. Normal saline as a irrigating fluid, so no TUR syndrome, no prostatic size as limit for HOLEP, decreased catheter time, blood loss, hospital stay, tissue retrieval for histological examination, comparative result with the standard TURP. Holmium also used in PUJ obstruction, ureteric stricture, urethral stricture, but more randomized controlled trials are required to conclude their success rate. Second laser is thulium YAG laser. Regarding physical property, both thulium and holmium are ideal for endourological applications. But compared to holmium, which is pulse energy, thulium is continuous laser wave. Depth of penetration of the thulium is less compared to holmium, it's 0.2 mm. So it has good vaporizing property and so good enucleation of the prostate, so short duration of the surgery. Also, it has high tissue ablation and hemostatic compared to the other laser. These are the procedures done with the thulium. Thulium laser enucleation of the prostate is the commonest one. The advantage of the holmium is its setting versatility, allowing both prostate surgery and urinary stone surgery can be done by the same machine. This is not possible with the thulium YAG laser. As this thulium is not ideal in stone surgery. The second important is the laser in the urothelial tumor. In upper tract TCC, it is helpful to take biopsy. Also, kidney sparing is possible in a low risk early stage disease. Lower tract TCC, en bloc resection of the bladder tumor with 1 centimeter margin has become possible with laser technology. It is good. It has good hemostatic properties. So patient on blood thinner, it is indicated. And also laterally placed tumor, there will not be any appurated to jerk. So it has advantage over other TURBT procedures. So what is new Moses technology? I'm not going detail into its principles, but it is the mode which is incorporated into luminous pulse P120H holmium laser. It shows the lowest retropulsion rate compared to other available lasers. Second one is the thulium fiber laser. Thulium fiber laser has a form of fiber laser rather than the solid state laser. Don't get confused with the thulium YAG laser. It is totally different, in which thulium doped fiber is used as a gain medium rather than the iron doped YAG crystal. Super pulse thulium fiber laser can break kidney stone into the dust-like particle about 100 microns. The advantage, these fibers are significantly smaller than the smallest currently available holmium fibers. Thulium fiber laser can break kidney stone into the pieces which are routinely 10 times smaller than the produced by the holmium laser. So large renal stone, patients with the comorbidity in which thulium fiber laser has advantage as a short duration surgery and good stone clearance. Take home message, holmium laser and thulium fiber laser are used as a lithotripsy in urology with superior outcome. HOLEP and THULEP are standard of care for BPH. Patient with anticoagulant medicine, pediatric and old age patient patient with anatomical malformation, in which laser has advantage over the rest of the energy sources. Thank you.
Vinayak, that was great actually to talk about lasers in 7 minutes itself was a difficult task. So great. Can you unshare the screen now? Can we go?
Sir, I have disconnected the AnyDesk. You can do it from your end, sir.
Okay. Right. Okay, fine. So all the faculty speakers are around, and the questions are going to come. There are a couple of questions on the chat box, but if there are any other people who want to ask up front, you are welcome. Now, the first question is from Dr. Deepak Patil to Shishir. How much glands should remain covered after circumcision? Shishir?
Yeah.
After circumcision, how much glands should remain covered?
Basically, I decide depending upon my talking to the patients. There are some patients who are sort of Hindu patients, or there are some Parsi patients who say that we need some amount of prepuce. And those people who have very tight phimosis and they say that we don't want a typical circumcision, in them I keep about 2 to 3 millimeters of prepuce in front. But if you keep too much, like you saw in my slides, there is some amount of fibrosis, and then again they have to come for a repeat procedure.
Okay, one more question from the audience. Are there any other techniques, of circumcision that you can mention?
There are many other techniques. The one that is common is they just pull the prepuce and make sure that there are no adhesions and just give a sharp cut by putting a clamp on the prepuce. And the latest one that is there is a stapler, which is a stitchless procedure, but it's very expensive. The stapler almost costs about 20 to 25,000 rupees. So these are the things that are commonly done.
Right. Any other questions from the audience? Advantages and benefits of circumcision. I think that has been covered, but you can just briefly mention, Shishir. Plenty of questions.
Like one of the latest papers mentions that it is almost as good as a vaccine. So the malignancies in women, that is cervical cancers, or malignancies in men as well, there is a decreased incidence. Those people who have urological problems like vesiculouretic, like reflux, hypertonic bladder, post-PU valve fulguration, they really benefit with circumcision. So these are the two main benefits. And the other thing is those people who come with a frenular band, the circumcision along with release of the frenular band is quite a good thing.
Right. Is Prasad around? Are you traveling?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hey, very good.
Yeah.
How to manage ureteric injuries? That is the question coming to you. How to manage those? I think you have briefly touched upon, but
yes,
anything you want to elaborate?
Most important thing is placement of guide wire. And whenever if you feel the ureter is tight, gripping, then it is better to put a stent and come out rather than pushing or pulling the scope.
Prasad, I want to ask you one question. Can I ask?
Yes,
Rajesh?
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
Prasad, what is the incidence of ureteric stricture after ureteroscopy?
Sir, depending upon how the ureter was tight, sir. Normally, if I feel the ureter is very tight, I put a stent, I come out, or I'll use a pediatric ureteroscope. But still with the pediatric ureteroscope, if I feel it is very tight, then I abandon the procedure. But I've seen that patients post with long-standing stone, they come up with ureteric strictures. rather than the procedure.
What I want to ask you about is a flexible ureteroscopy, ureteric stricture post flexible
So I
ureter.
haven't done that much cases to follow them up.
Okay. Any experience with avulsion of the ureter?
No, sir. No, no. I haven't seen, sir. I don't want it to happen also.
Yes, it shouldn't happen, but it happened with me once.
Yeah, it has.
Okay.
You're not senior enough to quote that. We are. It has happened to me, and I've attended 2 or 3 such calls in some other settings. One more question to Prasad.
Yes, sir.
What are the situations where you feel that the URS is likely to fail?
So the most important thing, if it is a long-standing impacted stone, upper ureteric, and while entry only, if I feel the VUJ is very tight and the ureter is very gripping, there are high chances that there will be failure. So I'll just abandon, I'll put a stent and come out.
That's very good. Any other questions? You want to say something, Rahul?
Are we going to ask questions to Rahul now? TURBT?
Yeah, yeah.
Rahul, I saw you doing a retrograde resection. What is the reason behind doing that retrograde? Why not in the antegrade fashion?
Antegrade means, sir, from retrograde, we are resecting from the front. Okay, we are seeing the front side. So we are doing the retrograde. Antegrade, we may not see the back side of the tumor. We can resect antegrade manner, but that is en bloc resection is not possible in that antegrade manner.
What I feel is occasionally if you do a retrograde, your cut can go deeper. So if you do antegrade,
for that we have to active the loop with this current setting with very short strokes.
And the other thing I was surprised is you installing mitomycin in every case. Rajiv, do you do that?
Not every cases.
No, actually, yeah. Go ahead, Rahul.
Installing mitomycin C not in every cases. Those tumors, it seems low grade tumor. Those who are suspecting high grade tumor, in that case, the mitomycin has no role.
That's very
Rajiv, does mitomycin have any role?
I think, one dose with 24 hours has been advocated, and I think it still holds true. Subsequently, I think if it is a recurrence in space and time, it is useful, and a 6-week course has been advocated. There's one more question here on the chat box about the BCG. When do you think that the BCG should be
is helpful in T1 and low grade tumor? T1 and high grade tumor, and it has to be instilled after 4 weeks after TURBT. And there are induction course and maintenance course. The induction course we instill after first dose after 4 weeks, and weekly installation, that is totally 6 cycles. Then in maintenance we instill at weekly BCG installation at 3rd month and 6 months. Then at 6 months weekly installation for every 6 months for 3 years.
When do you convert that?
Hello, sorry, sir.
When do you convert from BCG to cystectomy? Do you convert? Because you are doing BCG for high grade tumor.
High grade tumor. If it is a BCG refractory or BCG relapse. So during BCG course, during regular diagnostic cystoscopy, we come across tumor, recurrent tumor. Then we resect it, and if it is become a T2 or BCG refractory, then we have to go for the radical cystectomy.
What is the dose? It has been asked by one of the audience.
Dose generally we use 80 mg.
That's good. One more question. Indians have strong immune reaction to BCG. Not many people can complete BCG due to severe side effects. So what is your take on that?
So if after starting BCG installation, we come to know that whether they can tolerate or not. Those who develop BCG reaction like BCG sepsis, they develop a fever, they may develop a tuberculosis. In those patients, we have to withhold the BCG installation. We may start, depending on the mild, moderate, or severity of the BCG reaction, we may start the symptomatic treatment, or we have to start anti-tuberculosis drug. In those cases, we shift to the intravesical mitomycin C or epirubicin installation.
Yeah, good. Any other questions? It's my turn. Maybe any questions? Which is the best graft for urethroplasty? I think jury is still out. We don't know the answer to that. Buccal mucosal graft is today's the so-called gold standard. Whether it is going to stand the test of time remains to be seen. All of us are doing urethroplasty with grafts, buccal mucosa. It comes as close as possible to the wet, sturdy, and robust urethral mucosa, and therefore it is, it's the practice of the day or the standard of care. But there are failures. The best success rate is about 87 to 90%. But with infection, the grafts don't do very well. If you haven't done the good technique, they don't do very well. And therefore, buccal mucosa is not the best, but as of now, I think it is the standard of care.
Right.
Other than, there is one more question. What are the other grafts other than the buccal mucosa? You have skin grafts. You can take inner prepucial skin, outer prepucial skin. You can take post-auricular graft, but there are other theoretical grafts like bladder mucosa, even intestinal mucosa or an anal mucosa. But I think they are very well in the literature and in the books, but not in the practice because of inherent morbidity that goes with it. So buccal mucosa still stands tall, and therefore we are using it. Buccal mucosa is not just buccal, it's an oral mucosa. You can take lingual mucosa, you can take labial mucosa as well. So any other questions?
Rajiv, if prepuce is available, which one would you prefer?
Means vis-a-vis buccal.
Yeah.
It depends what I'm doing. If I'm doing a urethroplasty in an adult, buccal mucosa is very good. But if I am doing a hypospadias repair, especially a Bracas 2-stage repair, or especially a snot bush technique where you have to correct the cordy, you have to keep the graft in place for 6 months or maybe 12 months. At that time, the buccal mucosa cannot stand the dryness, and it just shrivels. So I will use an inner prepucial skin. Another thing is in hypospadia setting, the buccal mucosa actually heals thick. The inner prepucial skin actually heals supple, and therefore you can actually tubularize in the second stage. So if I were to choose, I will see what am I doing, which procedure I am doing.
If it is a sort of stricture of onion etiology, and it is a 2 or 3 centimeter stricture in the bulbar or pinoscrotal region, which one will you use? The prepuce is available.
Well, I think I will still use a buccal mucosa. If I have to use a graft, I will use buccal mucosa in this situation.
Why not Macanich?
Macanich is a flap, actually. A flap is very good. It can actually ensure that there is a good vascularity. But I think, graft are generally doing very well over the flaps. The flap has to be a local flap, and it can actually have the problems such as I was discussing, of a possibility of hair. Of course, in McAninch distal penile, there is a less chance, but it is a little bit of a morbid procedure. It is delicate procedure. It actually will involve dissection in 2 planes. So there are chances of complications. So buccal mucosas, if I have to use a graft, yes, it's the buccal mucosa over any skin graft.
Okay.
In distal mucosa also, in distal penile strictures.
Yes, there is a way to do it. In the distal, it's called as a fossa navicular stricture. There is a procedure called Nikolavsky procedure, described by Dmitry Nikolavsky from the New York State. He actually passes it transmeatally by dilating it and actually creating a raw area, and you parachute it down.
Many times the patients come to us, sir, with distal penile or little bit 1 or 2 centimeters away from the meatus. The stricture is
they cannot see the stricture, and it is proximal to the glans. In the glans itself. Yeah, if you cannot, if it is in the glans, there is another method called transglandular, but it is more invasive. You open the glans like a book and create the glans wings, go down. Either you excise the stricture or graft it and quilt it and close it, just like again book, but it is invasive. There are chances of glans dehiscence and fistula. But if it is a longer stricture, also extending into the penile, I would go through either a penile or a transperineal approach, not through the transglandular approach. Go through either the perineum or through the penis. If it's a younger man, transperineal. Older man, you can not sexually active, you can go through the penis as well.
Actually, Pratap's question was very good. Pratap, if it is a stricture in the glans, you can even use a local penile flap, like a Orandi flap. You can just turn it around and put it inside.
Yeah.
So you don't have to really open his mouth and take a buccal mucosa. Straight away take a Orandi from the glans itself.
Yeah, Orandi is for the in the penile urethra. For the glans, it's a Jordan's flap. The Jordan's is a very well known flap. It's actually preputial skin flap, actually, which is inserted into the urethra distally after opening it up.
Okay.
Yeah. Next question is for Dr. V.N. Magdum sir. PCNL, how to manage bleeding during PCNL? I think it's very good question. Everybody has faced this.
You are muted, sir.
Dr. Magdum, please unmute yourself. No, you are not.
Sir, left hand lower corner.
Yes. Go ahead.
Hello, I'm audible?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, this question was asked to Arthur Smith, father of the PCNL.
Hello.
How to stop bleeding? He said that don't do PCNL. PCNL means bleeding is taken as a part and parcel of this procedure. But nowadays, this can be definitely reduced. First thing is the most important thing is access. Precise puncture of the kidney through fornix into the pelvic LSL system is the most important thing. Second thing is reducing the tract size. And that's why from standard 26-30 French, we are now going to mini perk, which is now become standard of care, means tentative size. Then obviously there are, once bleeding starts, put the amplas, call it a day, and you can do in the second day or after some time. And if the suppose afterwards PCNL, one of the complication is AV fistula, AV malformation, then you have to do renal angiography and block. That is one of the most common complication of the PCNL. I would like to add some of the other questions also. Our panels have also nicely answered regarding the circumcision. One more advantage is in the reduction in the HIV. That is one of the way to reduce the HIV, and it is now proved that HIV also reduces after circumcision. Second thing is that mitomycin is standard of care. Obviously, in the within 24 hours, you are told. And the dose of the BCG, if you have toxicity, you can reduce it to the 40 milligram. And this is one of our Dr. Makarand has also and paper, and he has also, and especially in Indian population, you can give similar results by reducing the dose. Then third thing is that you have mentioned the lingual graft is also they have advocated in this erythroplasties. And I think
there's one more question, Dr. Magdum. Some light on PCNL in unascended, mal-rotated, and fused. These are some of the unusual conditions that you would see. So how would you tackle that?
Yeah, so these are the indications where you have to combine laparoscopy and you have to puncture the kidney under laparoscopy guide, because you have to push the intestine out away. Dr. Mahesh Desai has his doing ultrasound guided puncture, but that is a little bit very difficult, especially in obese patient. You can't see. So now we have done many patients with the laparoscopy, push the intestines outside and puncture the pelvic LSS system under guide. That is the way to go ahead.
Right. Any questions on the lasers from the audience? You want to summarize, Vinayak, what you have just delivered about the laser? What is but there's one question.
Rajiv, I want to ask one question.
Yeah, there's one question from the audience. What is the mechanism of action in lasers? How does it work? What is the way that it actually creates the energy that you want?
Considering the holmium laser, sir, in holmium laser, actually it is a pulse laser. In pulse, intermittently, due to the electricity which is converted into the laser energy, and in that way the vaporization of the tissue or bullet vaporization of the tissue takes place while we are using it on the soft tissue prostate. For the stone, it is the energy which is delivered to the stone which breaks the stone. For that the vapors are delivered to the stone in the bullet form, and that is the way stone is break, whether it is made to dust or fragments. In this way laser works.
You want to say something, Shishir?
Yeah, I know everyone says that the thulium laser is the best now, but Vinayak, any idea whether you can use holmium versus thulium? I know everyone would like to use thulium, but holmium, why is it not used?
No, sir, by thulium you mean thulium fiber, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sir,
Nayak?
thulium fiber has a definite advantage, sir, because the fiber size of the thulium fiber is definitely smaller than the holmium laser or thulium YAG laser. So overall, considering for the stone, the irrigation fluid for URS and all these things, vision will be good. Another thing is the energy delivered from by thulium fiber laser, it more precise, and fragments of the stone are made into more smaller compared to the best available holmium laser. I'm not comparing with the Moses technology, but compared to holmium YAG laser. And overall thulium has the good hemostasis and all the precise cutting for soft tissue prostate for prostate surgery. In that way also thulium fiber laser is used, means it is used for prostate, it can be used for the stone, multimodal use
is for thulium fiber laser. So it has
One more
limited
thing,
advantage.
yeah, one more thing I wanted to ask is, there are many people who do a optical urethrotomy ventrally rather than dorsally, like we do with our cold knife. So with laser, have you been able to do it ventrally?
So I have never done any optical urethrotomy with laser. I'm using cold, we only normal cold energy for that urethral structure.
Rajiv, what do you say?
Yeah, I think ventral is to be avoided for the very reason. So I think
But,
I have been
some of
asked to actually wrap up the session.
Okay.
The contribution by entire faculty members was brilliant. They were sticking to their times. Unfortunately, the initial hitch took the time away, but we are still in time. So thank you, everybody. May I just pass it on to Dr. Kadalge to finish the matter.
Thank you, sir. These were the excellent lectures on day-to-day topics of urology, and it was a nice demonstration within the time frame. I would take this opportunity for one more topic actually. So recently we have gotten news that Dr. Gunesh sir has contributed a whooping sum of ₹1 crore to the Armed Forces Battle Casualties Welfare Fund. So on the behalf of Kolhapur Surgical Society, I really want to congratulate him, and we highly appreciate the gesture. So thank you, sir, and congratulations.
Thank you. He's not on. He conveyed his apologies, but I'll pass it on to him. Thank you very much.
Once the physical meeting starts, we may like call him for the
Yeah.
yeah. So thank you, and I will conclude. First of all, I thanks speakers for their wonderful presentations. Thank you, Kasa sir, for being there. Varuke sir for arranging such wonderful sessions every Saturday. I also thank MMC Observer, Dr. Pawar sir, and today's moderators, Dr. Kore sir, Dr. Vinay Chowgule sir. Thank you, wonderful audience, for being patient and with the initial glitch and being there to attend. And last but not the least, thank you, Torrent, for platform of Zoom to conduct these sessions. So thank you. Have a wonderful night and see you next Saturday in the 16th session.
1 minute. Thank
Yes,
you, Kore sir, Rajiv Kore sir, for responding to the invitation and arranging this wonderful program.
Thank you very
with
much.
the eminent faculties.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Magdum sir, Shishir sir.
Thank you, everybody.
Rajiv.
Thank you, sir.
Rahul. Thank you. Thank you.